righty, last day of the semester, yay. I mean, oh dear. It's always so rushed at the end. I went to a college where we were on the quarter system, and so we stopped and started 3 different times. We went from something like September to early December, and then January to April, and April to June. And that was a lot of stopping and starting too, so I guess it's inevitable. I've handed to you the take-home part of your final exam. We were last time talking about the ways in which you should prepare for the final, how to review, what to review, and all of you have the sheet I gave you last time. It has now been posted on the Vista site with a few corrections that I made between the class time on Tuesday and the time I posted it yesterday. So they're not significant corrections. They're ones that I told you to make in class, but maybe if you don't mind printing out the review sheet from the website, that would be a good idea. Now what I'm handing you is the take-home part of the final. This also will be posted on the website. There will be a couple or 3 people who aren't here today. But again, let me just go over that with you. This is an odd kind of exercise, I think, because what we're doing here is asking you to look at Galeano, the 3 volumes, prepare an answer in your head, as it were, and then bring in those ideas and write that part of the exam in class. We've gone over that. That's number 1. I am as clear as I can be on that, and we've also talked about it a lot. Now, number 2, let's go through that. This you're going to bring in on printed paper. This part is not to become in your head. This is, you're going to write it because you're going to be studying the websites of your fellow students. And it's like a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt. It's not going to be hard to find these things, but they're all on the web papers, and so you'll be going through those, and you'll see that I go up to the letter W. So we're talking, what, 23 entries. There are not 23 websites. A couple of times, just for the fun of it, I've taken 2 items from one website, just to keep you having fun at this. But let's just look at this together. This you bring in to the final, and you hand it to me. Yeah, Amanda?
Do we have to write on, if we recognize that some of this is from like our own websites, do you want us to write on our own websites
Yes.
as well, and to say, you know, the name?
It's Amanda Davidson Bolivar. Yeah, you'll all find, I hope, unless I've overlooked someone, you'll all find your own website. Go ahead and put your name, because I want to know the name of the person who's the author of the website, because I want to make sure that you've looked at that version. I mean, there are lots of things. Juan Rulfo, you could go and Google Juan Rulfo, and there'll be a million entries, but I want you to look at the very beautiful web paper that was done on Juan Rulfo, an author that we've spoken about in this class but haven't read. And indeed, for the next version of this, if I do if I use these tapes for an online course, I think I will ask people to read Juan Rulfo. It makes a very nice pair with Elena Garro's Recollections of Things to Come. Okay, so what we have are 23 items. In each case, I give you a little bit, like amaranth. I want you to define and describe its uses. Venustiano Carranza, identify and describe his role in the Mexican Revolution, and so forth. So you'll see that there are a couple at the end. I get tired. U and V, the Popol Vuh and Francisco Jimenez. I'm going to just let you do what you've been doing all along. But I do want the author and title of the website. And almost all of them have titles. Yeah, Julie?
May it be typed?
Sure.
Okay.
That's better for me. So I could imagine you're sitting at your computer, you're going back between your own Word document, doing what, you know, A, B, C, D, and then checking the websites. So you'll just go down all of them, and there is only one, and I'll mention that again. This is an odd situation. T, letter T, Isabel Allende, describe her life and her work. There is a website on Allende. oddly enough, I can't see it on my computer. It's one of these cases. I can see all of the rest of yours, but not this one. So if you can't see that, if you have the same problem I have, then just please go on to the next question. And my apologies to the person who shall remain anonymous who has the Allende website. I need to go on to another computer and look at it at least, but Sabrina tells me it's great, and so, I mean, I've checked you off. So anyway, that's that. Everybody got that? It's a bit of a way of making you part of the material of the class, and I like that idea that you all are writing some part of what we're learning. And there are really some wonderful websites. I especially appreciate the ones that use visual materials to talk about, whether artists or, in the case of the Florentine Codex, wonderful visuals to talk about, well, a visual book, an illustrated text, but it helps us with our understanding of things. Okay, so that you bring in with you. The ideas for number 1, and number 2, the written list. And I do expect the full paragraph that is in the Xerox version. I should remember this, it was in red in my original, but it didn't come out obviously in the Xerox. I do want a full paragraph. I don't want to just, you know, fought in the Mexican Revolution or something. I want a carefully thought out paragraph, because you all on your websites have thought carefully about these issues. Okay, questions, comments? Jaime, would you push the, yeah. Yeah?
Yeah, it's paragraph per entry, right?
Per entry.
Right, per, you know, okay.
Yeah, and it can be a paragraph of 2 or 3 sentences, but I guess I just want you to think more than to say, you know, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, Baroque poet in Mexico. That's why I've added talk about her work a bit, because the site that's very nice on Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz has some of her poetry there. So yeah, a paragraph per entry. Yeah. Yeah, Lisa?
The review paper that you gave us on Tuesday is also going to be posted up on WebCT?
It is on the website now, corrected slightly from Tuesday. So it was that I'd left a paragraph there that wasn't relevant and so forth, and there were a few garbled things. I was in a big hurry.
Okay.
So yes, that, and there you're going to see the same as you will see. I looked at the final that I'm more or less got composed now, and the same Galeano question that was on the review sheet, it's now on this sheet, it will be on the final. You'll walk in and the first question is, do the Galeano. So that's a giveaway. It's fun. It's not testing your knowledge in the way that tests often do. It's asking you to prepare in advance something that's interesting to you and captures Galeano. Yeah.
Okay, so the final exam, the whole entirety of it will be the take-home exam number 1, the scavenger hunt number 2. I mean, this prepared
Yeah,
Galeano
you're going to walk
part.
in with the ideas for number 1. That's going to be the first of 3 essay questions. There are going to be 2 more that you won't have seen, that you're going to be preparing for in the ways that we talked about last time and the ways that are described on the review sheet. Then there are going to be about 11 or 12 IDs, ID and give the significance, identify and give the significance of, and there are going to be passages from the works we've read. And by give the significance of, and I'll say this again at the final, I mean I want you to say how this passage is important to understanding the work as a whole, or what it has. I mean, in other words, my passages that I choose, I only get to choose 11 out of, 1,000 and some pages, more than 1,000 pages that we've read this semester. I'm going to choose passages that I think are important to understanding the work as a whole, or some theme of the work. As I was telling you, I can imagine choosing a passage from The Storyteller that has to do with Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, because that will say something about Saul, something about the whole issue of acculturation, about the whole issue of what you do with a non-Western group. It raises all of the questions that the novel raises about how to maintain indigenous cultures while treating them fairly, giving them schools, giving them roads, sanitation, etc. So you get the point. Okay, now is that enough?
So
Yeah.
3 essay questions,
And
11
10 or 11 IDs, plus
the
you're going to
scavenger
hand in your scavenger hunt. Yes, we'll call it scavenger hunt, yeah. So it's not really very hard if you, really it's not hard if you've done the work. I intend it to be a bit long. And the essay questions obviously are going to be general. You can be sure there's going to be one that asks you to talk about certain of the novels in terms of their treatment, literary treatment of history. That's what the whole course is about. I'm not going to ask you, who was the second Habsburg king, though I would like it very much. If you knew that it was Philip II, we're going to look at the date sheet one more time. So anyway, let's see now. Does everybody? So everybody has this sheet, the take-home part of the exam. I hope I'm clear. If not, email me. I'm always on email, as you know, so there shouldn't be a problem. Are you all, well, I've given 2 of you, I think, extensions. Everybody else is set to hand in your paper to the turnitin.com, or you already have, correct? Good. Karsna, would you push the button, please? Thank you. Our anonymous future viewers want to know your question. Oh, go right ahead. We all want to hear it.
Oh, well, my paper, when I was getting ready to turn it into turnitin.com, my computer kind of exploded on me. Not exploded literally, but it just went blank.
Yikes.
And so I took it to the computer hospital, and they told me they wouldn't be able to recover. This happened to me not yesterday, but Tuesday, and they won't even be able to get it to me until Friday, and my entire paper is on there. But I do have half of it in an email, and I remember what I wrote on the rest of it. Maybe not word for word, but I can kind of conjure it up.
I'll give you an extension immediately. Why don't you wait till you get your computer back, and if it's all there, then you just hand it in to me by...
Oh, let me press this. It should be by Friday or Saturday morning.
Okay, so that's, you mean tomorrow, Friday?
Yeah, tomorrow is Friday,
okay, yeah,
isn't
good.
it?
Okay, well then, yeah, get it to me when you get your computer back. If it turns out your computer has eaten it, write me and we'll figure it out.
Be able to restore it, but
goodness, yeah.
You never know.
Back up, back up. I tell myself that all the time, but I don't do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, other comments or questions about the paper? Everybody all set on that? Okay. So I'm going to find a whole lot of them on Turnitin.com starting tomorrow when I start to grade papers, because there I have them. Yeah, Lexi?
We have until midnight, right?
Right. Okay. 11:59 is the only way I can set it. And if it's a question if you absolutely need, and I believe Turnitin, I've got it set so it actually will take late papers, because this always happens at every class. There are a couple or 3 people who need a day or 2 more. And in a way, this is perfect because we have quite a lot of time. I mean, your final comes very late in finals period, December 11th, so that gives me a lot of time to grade the papers. I mean, my other class, which is an online class, there are 49 students, so I'll be reading all of their papers, which is always interesting. It's just at the end there's always a lot, as you know. Okay, I want to just, we don't need to take the whole period today unless you want to continue doing what we were doing last time, which is thinking about some of the novels that we've seen and the other texts. What I did want to do is review what is on the website, visual stuff and a couple of textual things, because those will be included on your final. I mean, I expect you to know the things, at least be familiar with the things that are on the website, as I know you are. So let's just turn to, if Scott, you could put up my computer, we'll just take a look at what we've got. Obviously, the syllabus you know perfectly well. Week 1, Octavio Paz, Mexico and the U.S., and we also, let's just go to week 1 folder. I've already said on your review sheet that you're responsible for the Octavio Paz. We started the course with that text. Of course, it's very, very helpful, I think, as a way of getting large comparative categories for Anglo-America and Hispanic America. And that's something we need to have. Then you'll remember my date sheet, precisely the Habsburgs and the Tudors and so forth. I do expect you to have a sense of these. I'm not going to test you on dates per se, but if you were to toss in 1 or 2, that would make me terribly happy. But you'll just remember how this goes, the monarchies. Again, because I'm a comparatist and because I'm a North American, Anglo-American, and because I do comparative work, U.S. and Latin American, I'm interested in in the comparative imperial projects of England and Spain. And so that's why I give you the Tudors as well as the Habsburgs, 2 centuries, the 1500s and the 1600s of this, at least we go through here till the 1600. I kind of trail off with Bloody Mary, the Catholic daughter of Henry VIII. But what's interesting here is, I think I'm going to ignore that 1 second. I never get calls, but now I do. Sorry about that. I think I'll turn it off. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Okay. Sorry about that. The reason I'm interested in the Spanish Habsburgs and the Tudors side by side is because they kept trying to intermarry. Remember that Bloody Mary, who dies, and you must see the movie called Elizabeth with Cate Blanchett, as it's not the new one, the first one, there's a kind of sequel. It's more about Bloody Mary, Elizabeth's half-sister, than it is really about Elizabeth. And the point here is she marries Philip II of Spain. Why? Because Spain wants to unite with England and vice versa, these 2 great empires, European empires, the greatest, the largest. You know, the Dutch were important, the French were important, but the English and the Spanish, the Portuguese also very important. But it's a very interesting thing to think what might have happened had Bloody Mary not died rather young. And, you know, we might have all been speaking Spanish in the New World, you know, which would have been fine too. But so then I've put in red on your screen, and you already know this, I trust, the stirrings of modernity in Europe. So we have the black, which is basically the New World, and we have the red, which is the Old World. This is part of your cultural literacy. You know, you can't leave university without having a sense, at least a vague sense of Erasmus, a vague sense of, I don't know, Montaigne. If you don't have a vague sense of the names mentioned here, because we certainly haven't gone over anything Martin Luther, we've talked about Sir Thomas More, we haven't talked about, please Google these things. It'll take you 1/2 second, and then you feel good about knowing the roots of Hispanic and Anglo-America, because that's what these dates are about. As you remember, Carlos Fuentes does a lot with the Habsburgs, the Spanish Habsburgs. Remember that famous Titian painting that he gives us with the big jaw? The Habsburgs all had big jaws. We know exactly how they looked because they had fabulous court painters, including Velázquez, the greatest of the Spanish Baroque painters, who painted Philip IV again and again and again. Everybody knows what Philip IV Habsburg looks like because we love Velázquez's portraiture. So, anyway, there's that. That's going to be, now we're going to go back to home page. That's just, if you would, please do me the favor and yourselves the favors of reviewing those dates. Okay, week 2 are maps. I'm not going to belabor that. I hope you, please, studying for the final, just get in your head these maps. You'll remember which ones they are. There's North America, there's South America, there's the viceroyalties of New Spain, of New Castile, of New Granada. I gave you the way that the New World was carved up by Spain into viceroyalties. There were viceroys and so forth. So I expect you to know that. Peruvian art and architecture, I can't quite remember what we did with this, but we looked at a lot of buildings, and we'll look at them again. The reason I put the Peruvian Baroque here as opposed to, say, the Mexican Baroque is because it is different, it's more sober. I'm not sure what to say except about this. I don't think I'm going to ask you to identify this building. In fact, I feel certain I won't. I think that would be a mistake since we didn't spend much time on them in class. But when you're reviewing, just go through, because the New World Baroque is going to be an issue. Carlos Fuentes gives us that chapter 9 or 8, whatever it is, called the New World Baroque. I care a lot about it, as I've told you, because it happens to be my subject at the moment. And so what I think is you can't understand Latin America without understanding Baroque as it came from Europe in the 17th, 18th centuries, as it was transformed into the New World Baroque by indigenous artisans or mestizo artisans, by different materials, by different needs of the populations in the Americas. And if you go to Mexico, you have only to look around and you're going to see the Baroque. A huge, and same with Peru, huge construction during this period. Spain was getting more or less rich, though they were squandering their wealth, but the mines of Potosí, the mines of San Luis Potosí in Mexico fueled all of this incredible architecture. So just take a look at it. I've labeled each one. Cusco, the great colonial capital and center of Peru, of the Andes. Look at these buildings, they're fabulous. I have not been to Cusco. It's one of, and then these wonderful whimsical things like a mermaid playing a charango, as it's called, a small guitar carved in stone on an ecclesiastical building. That example is often cited. This is hard to take. It was a double page in my book and so forth. So that's why that looks a little odd. My technical person did as well as she could. But I just want you to have a sense. Remember what we talked about in the Mexican Baroque too. Very simple construction with very ornate decorative facades. So a kind of square building. There's nothing rounded. I mean, the Roman Baroque, where the Baroque starts, the buildings are often undulating. They wrap around a corner, let's say. There was none of that or very little of that with the Latin American, the New World Baroque. What they made up for was in exuberant decoration on the frontispiece, the facade. So you see that in this example. I'm not going to now go ahead and give you a lecture on the Baroque. Let's go back I happen just to separate out the Peruvian Baroque from the other Baroque that we're going to see in a minute. So that's week 3. Go to homepage, please. I think we're, dum-tee-dum. See, here we go. This is what is so annoying about web. And I'm not even on wireless, so this may be the end of it, or we may have to start again. Humpty-tum. It is that WebCT is having its problems, and okay, we just have to be exceedingly patient. This looks like a bit of problem.
Because I'm just asking, is it this time of the year?
I think there is.
It's just the traffic.
I think everybody is online. I think that's right, because here on Ethernet hooked in, otherwise I'd say, oh, it's my wireless is acting up or something, but here we don't have that excuse. Okay, good, let's just keep on going here 1 minute. I promise I'm not going to keep you the whole hour, because you can do this on your own, but I just wanted, there was one more file in this, and that's this one. This one I would like you to pay attention to. We looked at these paintings when we were doing Galeano. In the first volume of Galeano, there is a, or is it the second volume? Second volume. There is a passage or two on Pérez Holguín, P-E-R-E-Z, and then his last name is Holguín, H-O-L-G-U-I-N, and he's one of the great Peruvian painters. The other site is architecture, as you saw. Well, there's some paintings too. This is anonymous, but this is so interesting, this construction. I'm sorry that you can't see the whole thing at once on my screen. But this is the mountain that was the richest mountain in Latin America, filled and filled and filled with silver. And look what this is. Here we have the Pope on the bottom left. We have the king on the bottom right. That is the powers of the church, the powers of the state, on their knees, worshiping this virgin mountain. It is, and you see the animism of the indigenous group here, of the Peruvian peoples, that the mountain itself is a kind of virgin spirit force. So anyway, so it's one of those great examples among thousands of the syncretism that we've talked about, whereby indigenous animistic religion encounters the monotheism of Catholicism, and we get here a mixture. We have the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost in the form of a dove up above, and we have the Virgin here as the mountain. And what you have also is just these fabulous little scenes. When you see this painting in person, as I actually have, it travels a lot. Anyway, the first two, I believe, are anonymous. It's another version of this Virgin mountain. And then we go on to Pérez Holguín. And I do believe that I will put that one of the passage from Galeano that is on Pérez Holguín, because he refers specifically to this painting here. You'll remember that we looked at that, and so forth. More examples, and then the very, very last one, Galeano also refers to a painter. These are all Pérez Holguín, and we get to the last one, and it's Diego Quispe Tito. And this was the only one I could find that was worth anything on the internet. There are more, but you remember that Galeano's point was that you see the parrots in the trees, and you see all of the palm trees behind, the American context for the biblical figures. This happens to be Saint Jerome. So if you would look back in particular at Galeano's treatment of these two Peruvian painters, it's at the beginning of the second volume, as I recall. Okay, so that's what we have on week, oh goody, it's working, week 3, and then I skipped to week 7. You'll remember I've put up the outline, the study sheet for the buried mirror here, and then I've given you relevant websites. I'm going to have you look at this. One is on the Catholic kings, one is on the indigenous cultures that Fuentes deals with, but rather superficially, and so forth. Then we get into more Baroque. I suppose I should have put the Peruvian down in this week 8 because it's kind of part and parcel of the same thing, but we'll just take a look here for a moment. The New World Baroque, we saw that slideshow. You can review my comments on the streaming texts that are on your website if you want to, or just review the artwork to keep this in your mind. That's the idea of these courses. You know, I remember very well being an undergraduate, and it's sort of like the semesters came and went, and I kept the books. That was good, but then you kind of go on rushing to the next thing. I think from my older perspective, if there are a few images, visual images you can take with you that remind you of the course material, that would be wonderful. And I do think the New World Baroque would be the first place to go. This on the European Baroque, so that you know what was being brought over in the ships of the conquerors. I just give you a website. There are plenty of them that describe what the Baroque is, but then this is a great website because you can go and look at a lot of European Baroque painting. Architecture would be interesting to compare European architecture to the New World architecture and so forth. So I've put that there for you. And then, was it 7 here? I'm sorry, that's the buried mirror one. It's 8, I guess, that we're in now. The New World Baroque, yes. And then this I just put up for the fun of it. You can take a look. It's about 3 or 4 moving images. It's when one, as you know perfectly well, when you look around, Exposición de Pintura Barroca, and then Los Ángeles, the angels. I mean, Baroque is just filled with angels. These are Peruvian angels. You can tell them very easily. They're much more dressed up than the Mexican angels and so forth. There are only these 3 examples. And then Vírgenes y Santos, virgins and saints, a couple or 3 more. They don't even really give you your, or maybe there's more up here, but I don't think so. That was just something I liked, so I put it up. Now let's go back if we can. Alrighty, so the New World Baroque and some versions of it, whether painting, architecture, I would like you very much to take away from this course. Now we'll go to week 9 and just see what's in week 9. All of this, yes, now we're into Garcia Marquez, Colombian History, a Timeline. it would be nice if you were able to locate the two novels temporally. I don't see how you can miss. I mean, not only nice, really you have to know when Bolivar took his last 2 weeks down the Rio Magdalena, and you certainly would know that the Of Love and Other Demons takes place in the late 18th century, and how we know that, and so forth. So I'm counting on you to have a sense of Colombian history, and Garcia Marquez World is a website that you might find informative. All of this is put up as kind of study aids, if you want, and there will be more eventually as I develop the course. But okay, so then again, Baroque art and Garcia Marquez. I'm still working the New World Baroque, and I'm now connecting it to Garcia Marquez, and I hope you will recall what we did there. I put weeks 9 and 10 because those were the 2 weeks that we spent on Garcia Marquez. So again, more about the Baroque, and then this is actually an essay of mine that is up on a website where it's one of my, as I call them, illustrated essays, where I use some Baroque art to try to explain Garcia Marquez's fiction. I think he's super Baroque, Garcia Marquez, as I've argued to you in class. What does that mean? It means he takes the tradition, the colonizing tradition of Catholicism and empire, that all codified in the Baroque, which was the style of that was the imperial style. He takes it and he makes it into his own thing. So we get the suffering of Caetano de Laura, the exorcist, and we get it in terms of martyrdom and so forth. I think I don't need to go back into that too much. And then week 13, I have put up here, and this is what I did want to discuss with you, the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Next time I teach the storyteller, I will teach the Metamorphosis as well, because it gets mentioned a lot, and we know that it gets used to give us the clue, among other things, that this storyteller we're hearing is Saul, is Mascarita. I hate at the end to assign another thing for you to read, so I'm not going to assign it, but I'm going to say, would you please read the first couple of paragraphs? I think once you've read the first couple of paragraphs, you'll be interested to continue reading. I don't know how many pages it is. It's probably 15 pages. I guess I could look. It's not very long. Allergies, yeah.
I checked it out in a tiny little book.
Yeah.
And it was 40 pages of a tiny
Okay,
book.
so it's, yeah, 20 or so. Yeah, I don't think this is paginated, so we can't really tell. But look at the way this starts. It's just so brilliant. It's a translation I'm not familiar with, but look at, one morning as Gregor Samsa was waking up from anxious dreams, he discovered that in bed he had been changed into a monstrous verminous bug. He lay on his armor-hard back and saw, as he lifted his head up a little, his brown arched abdomen divided up into rigid bow-like sections. From this height, the blanket, just about ready to slide off completely, could hardly stay in place. His numerous legs, pitifully thin in comparison to the rest of his circumference, flickered helplessly before his eyes. Well, if that's not a bad dream, wake up and find yourself looking at your abdomen that looks and is that of a bug. But would you go on? Because this is perfect magical realism. The narrator doesn't say, this is very odd and it's probably a bad dream he was having. That's what a realist would say, but a magical realist says, yeah, he was a bug. And then he completely takes this, he doesn't say, how could this happen? Let me run to a specialist. He says, oh, well, I'll just have to kind of make do. He does say, what happened to me? He thought it was no dream. His room, a proper room for a human being, only somewhat too small, lay quietly between the four well-known walls, and so forth. Do read it and then wonder why Saul is so taken by this story. We've talked about it. He himself undergoes a metamorphosis. It means a change, a complete change of shape, of identity. It's also that Kafka, people worship Kafka. I like Kafka, but he begins that kind of terribly dim 20th century modernist view of things. You know, the castle, the trial, it's like the man is walking around in a nightmare, not knowing. He becomes Kafka's work becomes kind of symptomatic, let's say, of Nazism, of the grim 20th century. The 20th century was a horrible century. Genocides here and there, huge world wars. I mean, we hope that the 21st will be better. It doesn't look like it's starting out so well either. But Franz Kafka becomes kind of, he epitomizes a certain kind of literary modernism. And so the one I used to teach, it's also like this. It's like, ooh, it gives you sort of the shivers. It's called The Penal Colony. And it's about a penal colony that is a colony for prisoners where terrible things are done to people. So why, you know, I'm sure there are articles on the internet, I have to read a couple myself, by scholars and students who will consider why it is that this text becomes so important. We've, as I said, speculated about some important for this fictional character. Why Vargas Llosa chooses to make that the kind of seminal text for Mascarita. So anyway, I encourage you to read it. Again, it's part of your cultural literacy. This is probably about as famous a short story as any written in the 1900s, in the 20th century. And then our final paper, I'm just going to go back to the home page. The final paper is described. You're already all into that, so you don't need to think about that. We skipped the Virgin of Guadalupe. I do hold you responsible for that, for the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe's apparition to Juan Diego. If you need to be reminded, you go instantly to the internet and the story is there. In fact, maybe I put the link there. I'm not quite sure whether I did or not. Oh, golly. Well, we were lucky there for a while. In any case, you look at it and remind your mental eye how the Virgin of Guadalupe looks. Oh, I did. I put up a website. That's why it took a little long. Oh no, this is my own. Oh, this is my own text again. One more of my illustrated essays, where I tell the story by giving you the images here. I found that there's a detail of this very beautiful image. She's always the same because she appeared to Juan Diego, the indigenous man, and her image was imprinted on his tilma, T-I-L-M-A, his apron, worn typically by indigenous peoples on the Altiplano. Unfortunately, you can't see this very beautiful version. Can I make it longer? I should get a little bit more on. Oh, well, no, here we go. Okay, no, it didn't help. Okay, so there's that, and let's just return to that, to our homepage. I do want you to pay attention to this. I've said that the web papers of your predecessors in 2004 and 2005 are useful ways to review for the final. Your own you have to review in the ways we've already talked about, the famous scavenger hunt, and then here the review sheet for the final. I give you further reading. Sometimes students ask, none of you has, but sometimes students ask for more recommendations of things when you have nothing better to do than to read a good novel. Then so I put that up. And then the lecture videos. So that's kind of, I do hold you responsible for this content on the website, and I trust that you've been looking at it as you've gone along. So, okay, are there any questions, further questions? Yeah, Billy, would you?
When you were talking about Galeano and the magical realism and the New World Baroque, you mentioned Perez Olquin.
Yeah, Olguin. You don't pronounce the H, it's just there but silent, so you say Olguin.
Okay. I mumbled, I didn't pronounce the H, I didn't think.
What is your question? Sorry.
Anyway, yeah, Diego, what was the last name, the other guy?
Quispe Tito, the other artist that I only have one. I put those pictures up there because Galeano has beautiful little vignettes about each of those artists. They're Baroque artists. They're 17th and 18th centuries. And so I just would like you, you'll see there's a very nice website up on Diego Rivera. I'm going to look at it if you haven't already. Galeano does interesting things on Diego Rivera. Why am I focusing only on Pérez Holguín and on Quispe Tito? Because I am. I mean, he does lots on lots of different artists. What is your question? You can see I can start spinning here.
You wanted us
but
to
why
be
bother?
familiar with those passages. I imagine that they were going to be either an ID question or an essay.
Yeah,
something
well,
like-
it's very tempting when I go on and on about him in class to say, okay, well, yeah, I thought it was important enough to go on and on about it in class, so one of the IDs might be that one. At which point you would then describe the wonderful painting, that Virgen Cerro, that she's the Virgin of the Hill, that you've seen here. He's referring specifically to that painting. And he's referring to the first one. There are two, remember, that were similar that we looked at, but he's referring to the one where there's the Pope down here. We know it's the Pope because he has a beehive hat, the papal tiara, as it's called, the 3 levels hat. It looks like a beehive. And on the other side, the king. So we know exactly what painting Galeano is referring to. Now, we could read Galeano perfectly well and just, he describes the painting, but it's sort of fun to look at the actual painting he's describing. So I'm asking you all to think in terms of inter-artistic connections. There are different ways of doing the same thing. Sometimes you do it in words, sometimes you do it in images. Here he's having it both ways. It's too bad that Galeano's book isn't illustrated, because it would be nice if everybody had the artwork to which he's referring there to look at as you read the passages. He decided not to do that.
My actual question was, these passages, are they in the same passage or are they separate, the two
They're
artists?
separate.
Okay,
There are two of them.
how do you spell Diego's last name so I know how to look up that passage?
It's on the website. It's
Okay.
Quispe, Quispe, and the second last name is Tito. And what that tells you is he's of an indigenous origin, because those are, at least Quispe is a indigenous word. But if you look on week 3, it's right there on the label of that second file. And in fact, there's a mistake. The Paredes has the wrong kind of accent. It's sweet Jennifer Lazaro, my helper. It's complicated to get the accents going the right way. So I need to have her correct that, because I don't do accents on the internet. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Julie.
If, let's see, the words acculturation and transculturation,
Transculturation, yeah, that's, yeah.
is that the same thing?
You know,
or-
it's not. It's not. Acculturation is much longer in usage. Transculturation is something that's kind of, let's say, a bit trendy with people who study what we're studying now. Acculturation usually means that a foreigner gets adapted into a culture. So if you think about one of our great national myths, which is U.S. myths, which is the myth of the melting pot, that everybody comes here from everywhere, and then pretty soon they're speaking English only. They've acculturated into U.S. Anglo culture. Transculturation was coined not too long ago by a literary critic to talk about a process that's much more complicated, where both the, let's say, welcoming culture and the invading culture or immigrating culture affect each other. So that what we have, as in Houston, Texas, as in the U.S., this whole debate on immigration is so false, so wrong, that our Congress can't even agree on an immigration policy, much less a decent immigration policy. The transculturation is that both cultures are affected by the contact. So you get a trans, that is a bridging between the cultures. And certainly, as I started to say, in Houston, we know that. I mean, when I moved here 29 years ago, I thought, wow, goody, I'm a Latin Americanist, this is great. Houston's just going to be really Latino. 29 years ago, it wasn't. You look around and it's all these English Tudor houses and, you know, ranch style, 50s California. Even in Los Angeles, there's a lot more, you know, let's say tile roofs, what I would consider to be Spanish or Mexican. Plus, there was not so much, I mean, Mexican residents in Houston were really not visible. Over 30 years, I'm pleased to say that Houston's culture has enormously enriched because we've started to recognize that there is such a process as transculturation, not just that you guys look like us, speak like us, do like us, or you're not going to be recognized. So, and when I first got here, I was actually teaching Spanish as well as in the English department because I wanted a joint appointment, which didn't exist at the time, and so after a while I quit doing that. But I was shocked that there were many people who were very Hispanic, students in Spanish, who didn't speak Spanish. I said, you know, your parents, what generation? No, my parents spoke Spanish, but we've all heard this, that there was a way in which it was not encouraged. That too has changed. That too has very much changed. So I think if I can be probably too general, I would say Houston in the last 30 years has gone from a model of acculturation to transculturation. That we're aware and proud of our Hispanic and of our Indian and our Pakistani and of our immigrants. So this morning's New York Times has this very interesting article on immigration into the U.S. There are more immigrants, 1 in 8 U.S. residents has come from elsewhere. That's amazing, 1 in 8. And more people have immigrated in the last while, or since the 1920s. The 1920s was the high. There's a whole graph in the New York Times. Look it up on the web. It's just so interesting to see how we're evolving as a culture, or as cultures. But there's still English-only stuff going on, which I hate, and there's still, you know, kids that are being tested in the public schools who don't speak English. Guess what? They fail the test. Guess what? They're put in another, really our education system is lacking in terms of realizing the need for languages other than English. But anyway, now I'm on my soapbox, so. Don't want that. So that's a good question. Transculturation, we practically don't use the word in this course, acculturation, because we're interested in the contact, in the changes that occur when cultures come into contact. You could say that any friendship even between two people in the same culture is transcultural. I'm changed, you're changed. If it's a real friendship, let's say, if it's a love affair, if it's children and adults, any kind of contact is going to affect, for better or for worse, a little, a lot, but when whole cultures come into contact, then that's going to be changing both ends of the operation, both sides of the operation. The other word that is related is syncretism, which is slightly different. Syncretism means one culture's beliefs in another culture's forms. So that an indigenous person can kneel before a Christian altar, but worship, have in mind ancient deities. That phrase, idols behind altars, is a good one. Syncretism still goes on in Latin America. You see certain forms, Catholic forms, but then become filled with the meaning of another culture. So syncretism means two cultural belief sets operating simultaneously, because you can imagine an indigenous person and a Christian person looking at the same saint and getting something very different from that. So that's syncretism. And let's see, I guess that's about any other vocabulary words that we've been tossing around here. Seems like not. Yeah.
I just wanted to, if you could just briefly explain exactly what a frame narrative is as a literary technique?
Yeah, frame narrative. We saw a perfect example of one, which is the storyteller, right? Where you see a scene, it's usually the narrator, and it's often at the time that's different from the story that we're going to read, and it's the narrator. I gave you the example, a very famous example, which is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, where it's a ghost story. The Turn of the Screw is a ghost story. These children die suddenly for no good reason. I'm going to now start shouting with the construction work. Sorry. And remember, that story starts by a roaring fire in an English manor house, and a guy whose name it seems to me is Douglas is saying, guess what, I heard this story the other day. And then you go into the story and everybody said, well, why? I mean, one of the questions about that story is, why does Henry James begin in a time and place that isn't related directly to the story? Because he wants us to believe these men, these solid Englishmen sitting around a big fire, they're not any kind of nut, you know, and yet they're telling us a story that's pretty nutty. So the frame tale will often, and I should have lots of other examples, but I don't so much right now in my head. It will often be to set up the narrator who's then going to tell you a story about his past, tell you a story about what she heard from someone else. And then if it's a perfect frame, you come back to that narrative present, because you usually will flash back to a time before the narrative present when the narrator heard something, experienced something that he's going to tell you about. Often the reason is credibility, as it is in Henry James. In this case, we talked a lot as a storyteller about the frame narration, what effect it has. And that last scene in Florence, where you got all these different cultures, we're seeing globalization there. And he's celebrating that. Isn't this exciting in the warm night in Florence, that heart of Western culture? He put it in Florence for a reason too, I think, as some of you pointed out, I think, in your quizzes, that it's in Florence, but here is, you know, someone from Morocco and someone from Turkey and so forth. That, I think, is very important. He's trying to say something about transculturation, about the globalizing world, even as we see his great respect for the Machiguenga, his hope that they remain culturally coherent, culturally integrated in spite of the oil companies, etc. So that usually a frame, and sometimes the frame is just really short, but oftentimes you'll get a glimpse of a narrator who's going to tell you a story. You forget that that narrator is there, and then at the end you'll come back and you'll remember. You know, you could talk in a way about a certain sort of frame, that little introductory letter that Garcia Marquez gives us, signed by the name of Garcia Marquez, which is to say it's still a construction, we're not sure, but that he's remembering something that happened in 1948. It's down there, it's dated 1994, the date of the book. Even that's a kind of like there, the narrator takes off the mask of his own face and says, now I'm the one who's going to tell you the story, and then we get to the story. And that's really important, that first thing, because then we go back. I totally, when I first read that book, I forgot about that. You get into it, you get into Sierra Maria, and then you go back and he says, well, she died of rabies. And she's venerated along the coast of Colombia. So, well, okay, what do we do with that? So lots of times you're given a kind of narrative context, and you see the narrator, and then you've got to decide why the author decided to do it that way, and whether it's successful. Okay, I will see you on December 11th at 2 in this room, and I'll read your papers before then. And I will email you a comment or two if I feel that a comment or two is warranted. I will post your grades as I go, so you can look on your website to see if I've graded your paper.
Thank you.